What's going on, everyone? I'm Brandon Miranda, Grammy-nominated producer and engineer, and I am here to bring clarity and empowerment to those aspiring to careers in the music industry. For today, I wanted to open up one of my favorite tracking sessions I got to work on, a song known as Bomaye by Lovy Elias. This was an incredible project featuring some very talented producers and engineers, including Dupree, Chaz Jackson, and the final mixing engineer, Jaycen Joshua. This video would be highly beneficial for those of you trying to master recording your own vocals or interested in tracking other artists. And I'm very excited to open up this session and share with you some powerful vocal tracking tricks that are so simple and so light on processing, yet will make your vocals just from the tracking session sound incredible. Now, before we dive into it, I'll invite you to subscribe to this channel, like and comment this video, and push it up so we can provide more resources to other aspiring producers and engineers. So first things first, how did I get the gig? Well, Lovy happens to be my primary music mentor, hiring me in 2017 as his assistant. And in the first 2 years of my career, I worked for him full time. He trained me up on all things commercial music production. That was operating outboard equipment, that was mixing and mastering, how to record vocals, how to edit vocals, all of the basics and foundations of how to make great popular music. Then of course we maintained the relationship, and I would do a few sessions for him off and on, and even took a part-time job for his ministry, Revelation Church, working with and supporting their audio team. So then when it was time for my mentor to get back into the studio, I was very fortunate and very blessed that he called me to be the lead tracking engineer for these sessions. Alright, so now here I have the full session, and why don't we go ahead and take a listen from a little bit of the pre into the hook.
We acting like Jesus, what you Judas? What about the blood that runs through us? Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah. All they wanna do is I wanna know why. Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah. All they wanna do is they pray on your soul.
This was so much fun because I actually got to apply all of my training and understanding that the artist trained me in during my assistantship. And the biggest thing that I took away from my time working for Lovy was the power of using the most minimal things to get the highest return. This makes the sessions easier to mix. It makes the sessions easier to process and share. And honestly too, when you sit back and really listen to some of the greatest records of time, they are, for the most part, very simple. Just focusing on the most powerful elements to carry the weight of a song. And this is especially true in music coming out after the 2000s. So let's break down my template right here. And in fact, this is not a far offshoot from the templates that I have online. So if you're interested in going deeper, please check out the link below and you can see some of my vocal tracking and my mastering templates. I have everything set up revolving around the vocal when I'm recording. So while I may have the beat stems down here, I actually imported these after the sessions were done so I could share the session with the final mixing engineer. But everything was based off the 2-track channel down here. It's routed actually straight to my output, and then all of these tracks are my individual vocals. So I actually have my lead vocals right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. I have something that's become really kind of my favorite sound to play with, and a lot of my clients love the way I process ad-libs. So I have my ad-libs tracks down here, and then I have a group, and usually I start off with 2 groups but then consolidate to just 1 while I'm tracking, but I have a group of background vocals as well. Oh, and then I have all of my vocals. So every lead vocal, my libs folder, and my backgrounds folder, you can see they are all routed to this auxiliary channel up here called my all vox, boom, delineated with a plus sign, so I know that this is actually a bus. And my all vox is then, of course, like the instrumental, routed to the very end of this master chain. And when I'm delivering a tracking session bounce to my clients, I keep everything so simple. Everything in a tracking session is about time and efficiency, and you want to honor the energy of the artist's feelings and emotions. And if I get too lost in the weeds of trying to tweak things and trying to get a crazy mix down in the process of it, it kind of becomes a little bit selfish on my part, and I'm taking away from the artist's time, who's really making the predominant investment of the studio time, the gear, and hiring the team around them. So I keep everything very minimal. I try to make sure I come in with a template that sounds already amazing so I don't have to tweak for things. All right, so here are my lead vocals for the chorus.
Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah. Bomaye, yeah. All they wanna do is, I wanna know why.
Now let's go ahead and listen to our ad-libs in the chorus. Check this out.
Judah, Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah. Bomaye, yeah.
And then now finally, let's listen to our background vocals and kind of hear what they're doing too.
I wanna know why.
And these ones too on the verse.
Big lies, big lies. Big lies, big lies.
Amazing. So if I mute the instrumental and we can just listen to the vocal arrangement on its own, you can start to hear how all the individual parts interact with one another.
Through us. Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah. All they wanna do is, I wanna know why. Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah.
Okay, so let's break down the processing for the lead vocal over here. So keep in mind, with the lead vocal, I'm already using some outboard gear to process that raw audio before it even hits Pro Tools. And this helps to make a very high quality sound and also minimizes the amount of mixing in the box that I have to do. What we use for Lovy's vocal is a Neve 1073. I then compress the vocal with pretty moderate to almost heavy settings using a stay level, which is basically a higher quality version of the LA 2A. This is a very nice and slow compressor, so I can actually hit the vocal pretty hard without over compressing it. And then I had a purple 1176 clone basically, and I was using the purple to then catch any of the loudest peaks. So that compressor would just barely kind of hit whenever Papa got too loud on a moment or got too peaky in a moment. But for the most part, most of the compression and heavy lifting with that was being used by the stay level. These are awesome units, but there's so many alternatives that you can use for them too in the box as well if you don't have access to these tools. Now, let's go ahead and break down the chain. I don't typically use Auto-Tune Hybrid, but at the time my computer wasn't working, so I leaned on this one for my Auto-Tune. It works great. It got the job done. For this genre of music, kind of Afrobeat, Caribbean type vibes, I like to use a very fast retune speed, and that's what the artist usually prefers. Then come down to my EQ settings. So why don't I go ahead and turn off all the effects here, mute my other tracks, and let's listen to this vocal just raw. Boom, 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 boom. So here's the vocal with no EQ, no compression.
Oh my, yeah.
And then I add my EQ. This is fairly a quick and rough EQ for the sake of being fast and on the fly in the mixdown. But in general, these settings around 300, 1500 hertz, and about 35 to 5K, depending on the vocalist range. Notching these out will make for a much smoother sounding vocal. So here is it off.
Oh my, yeah.
And here's it on.
Oh my, yeah.
So that sounds good. It takes out some of the mud. I think probably if I'm mixing the record, I would roll back on those to make a bit warmer of a sounding vocal. But again, we're here to be quick and efficient with our sessions. So sometimes there are decisions that I have to leave for later in the mixdown. And as long as the artist can vibe and flow and feel like they can quickly move through their session, then we're at a good space. RVox as my slow limiter. And again, this is to really kind of bring out the level. I like raising the gain on the RVox sometimes because it adds some kind of just nice push once it's almost peaking a bit. So here's without.
Oh my, yeah. Oh my, yeah.
And one thing about limiting compression, I know in previous videos I've spoken about just kind of thinking of it from a perspective of limiting loud parts and quiet parts. That's the rudimentary part of it. Another level to start to understand what happens with compression is that when you bring down parts in a vocal and you kind of start to compress it, you can actually make a vocal feel a little bit more expressive. And that's what we're kind of going for over here. Then I have another layer with an arm compressor, just again to really tuck in and make sure that this vocal sits within the mix nicely.
Oh my, yeah.
Here's it off.
Oh my, yeah.
And let me actually play this in the context of the instrumental. So when you have it off, some of the words and the lyrics start to fall back into the background of the mix, But then with the compression, I'm able to pull up the level of the vocal a little bit more and get it sitting in a very nice spot of the instrumental. Nice. Okay, and then something that I love to do, and it's definitely a rule-breaking kind of thing, but I love to use a little bit of micro shift just to add some stereo width and solely, honestly, to make a little bit of a differential between the chorus and the verse vocal. So let me mute the instrumental again. Here's the vocal width now, just a tiny bit. Like, what a percentage are we using here? Like barely anything of the micro shift. So here's it on. Here's it off. And so we know what we're hearing for. You're gonna hear for some stereo width and a little bit of kind of like a chorus flangy effect. So here's a little bit with too much. So I bring it down to very just being barely detectable. Here's it off. And here's it on. So it adds a little more push, a little more volume, a little more width and weight to the vocal. And so you can listen for that differential. I'll play out from a little bit of the verse here, and you can hear it transferring into the chorus, and you'll notice just a little bit of push now because of the micro shift.
We acting like Jesus, what you Judas? What about the blood that runs through us? Yeah.
Love it. Sounds awesome. All right, let's talk background vocals. I keep my background vocals when I'm tracking so simple. If you can see, you might get even a little bit mad that all I have right here is just some auto-tune, and then my background vocal bus is doing my EQ and compression, and it's so very slight, right? We're trying to do these as quick as possible. So go ahead and listen to these.
All they wanna do is, I wanna know why.
But that sounds so cool once they're built up. Do I use vocal align? I will, but a lot of times I actually prefer to take vocals and chop them up. So right there, I might cut out that extra breath. And then if I feel like they need to line up more, I'll actually move them like this. And I'll make these moves while the artist is tracking or when they're taking breaks, so I can kind of line everything up without interrupting the session. And actually after that correction, let's see if this vocal arrangement sounds and fits tighter.
I wanna know why.
Nice. I'll add a little fade right there.
I wanna know why.
Love that. And then here how it was before.
I wanna know why.
So now it's a lot tighter, a lot cleaner. This is kind of something I prefer to use instead of vocal line if the vocals aren't too loose and it's going to create too much work for myself. Found that vocal line tends to make background vocals feel a little bit unnatural, and I prefer having a little bit more variation in looseness rather than just using a plugin to line everything up. Now my EQ settings over here for my vocals. So let's turn off those and let's listen back. Here is my background vocals with no EQ, no compression.
I wanna know why.
Here is now with the EQ on. You can see I'm doing quite a bit of cuts at the main frequency. So yeah, so 268, a good frame of reference for there is 250. 1000 hertz where there is a lot of energy, and then about 5K where the S is and that mid-range happens, and then I actually like to boost at around 10K just to kind of have a little polish going on those vocals. So now we can listen with it on.
I wanna know why.
And then here's it off.
I wanna know why.
I have a large low cut at 135.
I wanna know.
I don't want them to interfere with the lead vocal. So let's actually listen back. So here is the background vocals with the lead vocal, no processing.
I wanna know why.
And then now here is with the EQ.
I wanna know why.
And removing that low end allows the lead vocal to really breathe, and it makes some more clarity. It makes those background vocals pop out in my left and right a whole lot more. Then I use compression, and usually I get pretty heavy-handed with my compression, especially on the attack. I want to make sure that the background vocals don't pop out too much. Check this out.
I wanna know why.
Here's it off.
I wanna know why. I wanna know why.
The main thing to note here is my fairly aggressive attack settings on this compressor. I want to make sure that the lead vocal really pokes through the mix way more than the background vocals, and by using a quick attack, I'm softening those main transients the most.
I wanna know why.
Amazing, cool. All right, let's get to one of my favorite parts, the ad-libs. With my ad-libs processing, of course, I'm using auto-tune. I am using the Pro Q in the phone effect. If you go through some of the different instances, I modify a little bit so the different ad-libs, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, they actually have slightly different textures and they can interact with each other better. I also kind of adjust levels depending on which ad-libs I want to come out more. And then also I use some pretty heavy-handed limiting just to make sure they stay compressed and tucked into the back of the mixdown. A nice rule of thumb that I like for using my ad-libs is to make sure they're about 5 to 7 decibels quieter than the lead vocal. So this lead vocal is at +2. The ad-libs are here at -5 roughly. So there's some nice space. If I have them too loud,
yeah, all they wanna do is
they start to kind of take over in the mix.
yeah, all they wanna do is
When I'm listening for my balances between vocals, especially between ad-libs and lead vocals, I really try to make sure I can hear the ad-lib behind the lead vocal. And you achieve that, one, by kind of darkening the EQ, but also by your volume levels. So when you raise the volume of something, you bring it to yourself closer. And when you lower the volume of something, you actually push it further back in the mix. Try adjusting some levels within your own mixdowns and be analytical in how you hear these things. And you'll be able to notice, hey, when I raise the volume of a vocal, I actually do feel it coming more forward. And when I lower the volume of another element, I actually kind of do see it kind of transitioning over to the back of the mix. Having that visual connected to what you hear will be so beneficial in order to get you better at hearing small nuances while you're mixing. Then the main sauce that I use for these ad-libs is right here. I have my CLA vocals. I have it on chamber, quarter, spreader. An awesome artist showed me this preset and I've just been obsessed with using it on like almost everything. But I keep all of these guys almost up, and then some of the instances changes. I usually keep the EQ settings and the compression settings on the CLA off, but sometimes I'll make slight adjustments to those things. So for instance, pull down the high mids on libs number 2 so it sits behind the other ad libs in a different manner. And you can adjust depending on what your wants and your needs are. And you can, of course, as you see here, adjust these things to follow suit so some ad libs don't step up on each other. Finally, I have all of my vocals going into my all Vox channel, and my changes are very slight. I'm just doing small little movements to make sure everything's tucked in nicely against the instrumental. So if I turn these off and we play our vocals against the 2-track, here's it with the EQ off.
through us. Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah.
And then here's it with it on, and I'm just doing a slight boost at the high end. I noticed that for hip hop, R&B, and Afro beats, I like to boost my vocals around 8 instead of 10K. It makes for a slightly different kind of feel. It's a little bit more stylistic. So I'll boost over here, and then around 5K, boost it out to pull the vocal out some more, and then to remove a little bit more muddiness. Since all of our vocals are kind of building up when they're against each other, I remove a little bit of muddiness down here at 300 and over here at about 100 hertz over here. And I'm not removing anything more than about 3 decibels. So here's it now with the EQ on.
Through us. Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah.
Here's it off.
Through us. Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah. Bomaye.
And then I have another round of EQ just to add a little bit more boost, but soften those harsh S's right here at that 5K hertz.
Through us. Bomaye, Bomaye.
Here's it off.
Through us. Bomaye, Bomaye, yeah.
Nice, that sounds amazing. And then finally, I can't ditch the effects over here. Very, very simple, super minimal. I've seen a lot of engineers' templates with tons of reverb channels and buses and effect sends. I personally don't like to use too many effects because I think it can make your template feel like spaghetti. And so I just lean on 2 primary effects. I have an H delay, set the ping pong mode. I cut a lot out. I do this to add some rhythm to the vocal, and the ping pong effect, bouncing left to right in the speakers, adds some nice stereo width. So let's check this out actually.
You receive grace, but you're not show mercy.
You can hear it bouncing left, right, left, right. If I push it too hard,
You receive grace, but you're not show mercy.
there it is. So now you know what to listen for. So check this out, how it sounds without the delay on,
You receive grace, but you're not show mercy.
and then now with it on.
You receive grace, but you're not show mercy.
It adds some space, so whenever he stops singing, there's some pockets that become filled up, and then also adds a little bit of a bounce to the vocal. Now, reverb settings. I'm a huge fan of Valhalla Vintage Verb. I like the vintage sound. Sometimes I'll change the color to 1980s, but I love the 1970s. I'm usually bouncing around between using these 3 settings: the concert hall, the bride hall, and the plate. And we can go ahead and kind of compare and contrast. All you'll really hear is a little bit more of a change in coloration with how the vocal interacts with this reverb. So let's listen.
You receive grace, but you not show mercy.
There's a little bit more high end and the tail feels a little bit tighter. Let's listen now to the bride hall.
You receive grace, but you not show mercy.
A little bit looser, yet kind of a cleaner feeling. And then plate.
You receive grace, but you not show mercy.
A lot more conservative than the previous 2. And I ended up choosing the plate just because the song is so rhythmic. I didn't want to muddy up the feel in the pocket. Let's go ahead and listen to all 3 of these right in concession with each other.
You receive grace, but you not show mercy. You receive grace, but you not show mercy.
Probably the loosest of all of them.
You receive grace, but you not show mercy.
And definitely the tightest. And also too, let's bring up the question of decay times and pre-delay. While I am tracking, I don't mess with these settings unless I have a quick moment to break away. Clearly I didn't, because I left it at 0 milliseconds of pre-delay and just on a standard time. I really come to love calculating my pre-delay and my decay times. And so if I have a moment where the artist is stepping away, I'll actually pull out my phone and look up a pre-delay calculator, pop in the tempo, and then it'll give me a range of pre-delay and decay settings to be able to lock in. One thing for sure is the longer you dial in your pre-delay, the more and more ambient that reverb is going to sound. So you want to be very, very careful while you're doing this, especially if you're trying to do it while you're recording the vocalist. I try not to make too many changes in the mixdown because sometimes the vocalist can be sensitive to it and it might throw them off while they're performing a take. So there you have it, guys. That's my breakdown of how I engineered Bomaye by Lovy Elias. Again, if you found anything helpful in this video, please like and show my channel some support by subscribing. Also, if you want to go in deeper to building your resources in the music industry, definitely check out my Patreon subscription, where we do bi-weekly group Zoom calls to go over track feedback and career guidance. Thank you for all your time. Brandon Miranda, and we're out.